All right. Welcome everyone to the webinar. This is the second webinar series in our Shared Kitchen USDA grant info sessions. So today we are with New Venture Advisors to kind of talk through their work on these USDA grants in the past and their experience. So I'm Ashley. I'm the founder and CEO of Food Corridor. Our organization is acting as a technical assistance partner for USDA to help get the information into folks' hands. This year, there's a lot more funding available through the LAMP grants because of the stimulus money from COVID, as well as the Farm Bill funds. So it's a great year to consider applying if you haven't yet, and we are excited to put this information in your hands and hopefully have some more shared kitchen projects applying this year. So without further ado, we'll have everyone stay on mute. Kathy will take over, and then we will have the panel, and then we will have a Q&A in the chat box at the end. So please stay muted, and thank you so much for being here. Kathy, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Kathy Nyquist, New Venture Advisors. I am pleased to have been asked by Ashley to speak with you all today about how these grants can support your vision. And, we actually are an LFPP grant recipient ourselves, and we'll show you the work that the USDA funded of ours in a bit. I am joined by my two colleagues, Andrea Carbine and Sheree Goertzen, who have worked with NBA for many, many years. Andrea is a senior project manager and also kitchen operations specialist. She's played the role that many of you play in the past. And Sheree is a research analyst, but also a grant specialist on our team. So each of them are going to be able to speak to the opportunity from their perspective. Sheree's, it relates to, what it's like to apply for these and carry out these grants, and Andrea as someone who understands what it's like to have a vision and need the resources to carry it out. So we'll be sharing our experience and that of our clients in this webinar. And just in case you don't know NBA, we are a food systems strategy consulting firm specializing in infrastructure development. A lot of our clients have started or scaled kitchens, whether they are incubator kitchens or commissary kitchens or food production facilities. And our clients are nonprofits, public agencies, entrepreneurs that are all trying to take advantage of the tremendous growth and opportunity and need in food systems that we're all understanding more today than we ever have. So we work all across the United States and are currently working with some of you. It's nice to see some friendly faces here. They're all friendly, but some of them are more familiar, I guess. And so, as I mentioned, we work on all kinds of different kinds of projects, but I just want to point out that, our work began sort of in food hubs, doing the aggregation and distribution aspect of food system infrastructure. Over time, those projects have expanded to encompass a lot of components, and often the kitchen is at the heart of it, whether it's an incubator or a commissary. But today we're doing a lot of work in community food centers, which combine a lot of different kinds of food enterprises under a roof or as part of a campus. So you'll hear Andrea talk a little bit about that in the examples that we'll share. So today we're going to walk through the 3 grant programs and invite you to consider which is the right one for you, how to use them for your projects, and then demonstrate with some examples from our portfolio how to use them to start or scale a kitchen or community food center. And then also talk about what you want to be thinking about if you're going to apply, and then point you to some resources that we have. We are recording this. Ashley's going to follow up and provide a copy of these resources for you. And when we are done with this, sharing these points with you, we'll invite some questions which you can place in the chat. So we'll hopefully be able to answer some of your questions today, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask them after the fact as well. So that's our agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to Sheree to take you across the 3 programs.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I am assuming that most of you have kind of some familiarity with the 3 LAMP grant projects, but just an overview again, real quick. There's the Farmers Market Promotion Program. It is due June 21st. There's 2 different types of grant. There's going to be a capacity building, which is a smaller amount over 2 years, and then an implementation grant, which is up to $750,000 over 3 years. There's the local food promotion program. Kind of the same frame for that. There's a planning and an implementation, and then there's a regional food system partnership grant, and that is going to be a larger dollar amount, and it's due at the beginning of July. Just to break it down a little bit further, on the next slide, I'm assuming that most of you will probably be considering an LFPP grant, but I don't want to make that assumption. So just to kind of review what these grants are supporting. The farmers market traditionally has really been about supporting physical farmers market grants. But as times change, the grant has really moved into marketing to help producers and small farmers get their product out. So if marketing is your focus, this might be a better fit for you. In any kind of strategic that's helping direct producer to consumer market opportunities. The LFPP is a grant that really focuses on anything along the supply chain activity from producer to the end user, to the person who's consuming the food. So any type of business or infrastructure that's happening along that supply chain activity, this is what that grant is interested in supporting. There's a huge focus as well on the value-added agriculture pieces of it. This is, shared kitchens are a piece of that infrastructure. They're also looking at, transportation, the technology, that things that help get that food into the user's hands. So I'll kind of hit that one a little bit more. And then there's the Regional Food Systems Plan. This is a larger grant because this is specifically looking at a partnership between a public and private entity. So the grant should really be used to leverage private dollars into the project as well. So if your grant is working, if you're a nonprofit and you're really working as part of a larger city or regional planning project, and you have that partnership that's happening, again, this is a partnership that will be applying for the grant, not just a sole entity. So it's very similar to the LFPP, but they're kind of looking for that, like the broader scope. So that's kind of why that is the biggest reason why it's up to $1 million. But just a key, that's a public and private partnership entity. So those are the 3 different types of grants. And then, as I had mentioned, each grant has kind of a planning, a technical assistance piece to it, or an implementation. The planning grants are really, really helpful if you are still in phases of, I'm not quite sure what we're doing. We have this idea, but we don't know who all the players are going to be or what it's going to look like, or we need to be able to do the planning pieces before we actually do. So this is a 2-year grant. This is something you can apply for, do the planning phase, and then in 2 years apply for an implementation grant. That's why they're at a smaller dollar amount. So this is really thinking about your business planning to strategic planning to any kind of community organizing that you need to do to help get the project off the ground. A planning grant is such a great opportunity, and there's not always a lot of opportunities for these types of grants. Implementation grants are, you're ready to do the thing. You've already kind of done the planning process. You can include a little bit of planning, but they really want to see outcomes. Specifically related to how are you creating more jobs? How are you supporting local farmers? So be able to have some kind of output for the implementation grants. These are 3 years long, they kind of cover 3 years. You could have a larger dollar amount because you can spend money on sub-grant awards. So you can be giving money to other entities to help them along in the process. The key thing to know about implementation grants is kind of what you can use the money for and what you cannot. So you cannot use the money for construction. The idea of an implementation grant is that you are going to be developing and expanding programs, and it's something that already, in a space that already exists, that you own, not something that has to be built or a building you have to go and buy. Same with transportation. They're very specific in saying, if you're going to be doing transportation support, we're not going to buy you a vehicle to do this. They will, however, money can be used for specific for anything that relates to your outcome. So if your goal is, I need to build more storage space, but we need to have cooler space, they will support cooler space. Same with anything on processing, value-added products, things within your kitchen that are really unique. So some of those larger pieces of equipment that have a higher dollar value, this is a great opportunity to be able to purchase those things and then put them to use. So those are that. And so Andrea is now going to talk a little bit more about developing your grants when you're thinking about a planning grant or an implementation grant. Because these are multi-year grants, there has to be a lot of more work in looking at the long-term picture. And so using that as a framework, she can kind of explain how to help put your proposals together and thinking bigger and thinking about who your partners can be in this process.
Thanks, Sheree. Very nice to meet everyone. So glad you could join us here today. So my part of this is really from an implementation and from seeing folks using these grants out in the real world. One of the biggest takeaways on LAMP grants is, these are big picture grants. What we always encourage folks to do, there are the small pots of money that you use if you need to buy a new stove, or if you need to do small repairs on your building, or if there are specific small goals that you have to facilitate your business. A LAMP grant doesn't fall into those categories. So what these grants are really designed to do are to help you take a step backwards and say, how can I expand the scope, the reach, the capacity, or the audience of who it is my organization is working with, serving, or collaborating with across my community. A big piece of most of these grants on both the LFPP side and the regional grants is, you heard Sheree talking about partners. They're very encouraging organizations to really reach out into their communities and see, how do you engage stakeholders and audience members and collaborators into your project with you to advance a bigger cause. How do you tackle food access or food system or COVID recovery with a few different partners working together towards a larger end game? On the planning side, this is your opportunity to say, I have this infrastructure, or I would like to see this program idealized, and who can I work with in order to help me do that? On an implementation side, you can say, I have a shared kitchen. It's helping, incubate some great talent right now, but how could I maybe be delving into food access, or help support outreach in my food system, or help grow the audience of folks who know we're here and can have access points to things. One of the things we really encourage folks to do is, if you're considering applying for one of these grants, whether it's planning or implementation, is to ask yourself the question of, what will this grant opportunity offer me, my organization, and my community? And you should be able to answer that question across that spectrum, not just for your specific organization. And secondly, what are the needs beyond the immediate services that you provide that you'll be able to expand and to meet with this new program? So that sort of helps us bridge into, on the next slide, we pulled some great examples from folks that NVA's had the pleasure and the opportunity to work with over the years. Not all these folks have gotten a LAMP grant in some way, but we think they're great candidates for them. The first example there, the Midwest Food Kitchen, is a prime example. This is a shared kitchen model. They're working currently in a smaller space with 2 stations. They have secured a building in a larger location that is going to allow them to expand to more hotline stations and more prep pads. but they have built out a project that is not just about that expansion opportunity. They've incorporated into it expanded programming, increasing resources to the community in regards to food access, entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurial training. They're creating greater market opportunities with some pop-up marketplaces and additional market space within the facility for women and minority entrepreneurs. And then they're also creating a micro-lending program that's aimed specifically at BIPOC and immigrant communities that they're serving. So you can see there how they took a smaller scale project and blew it up in order to look at a wider scope that applied across a community lens. As we sort of travel down this chart, you see that same iteration. Each one of these projects really speaks to specifically, a smaller facility operation, how they can then reach into community and partnerships to expand, and how does this sort of tackle a big picture item. For the Pacific Northwest Food Campus, this is a perfect candidate for an implementation grant. They have a campus sort of idealized. They already know all their building partners and components that they're going to build out, but they are now going to be able to collaborate across a multiple project partner entities in order to look at housing access, food education, agricultural incubation, and more in this one space. This will also highlight a specific program that was funded with some earlier COVID dollars that created a sort of farm to pantry program that took excess crop from farmers and helped to create long-term storage items that could go into food pantries across their community. So this creates a site that can now expand that program into new partnerships. As we work our way down, the Southern Food Kitchen, that's going to enable them to look at healthcare resources being integrated into a shared kitchen setting, sort of a veggie RX and farmers market access program. Also potentially integrating some mobile food access programs that will go out into the community. Like Sheree said, it's not going to pay for the vehicle itself to go out, but it will help support and facilitate all the programming that will surround it and the needs and structure needed to implement that program. We have a great Midwest facility that's an excellent example of multiple collaborators using a collective resource model, where there's sort of a hub center that acts as the sort of aggregator of resources, working with 5 or 6 partners that are more focused in, homeless treatment and services, food access, incubation services, training services, etc. And so this specific facility will increase technology uses for all of them, will increase a access point for food in a food desert and a BIPOC community, and really expand upon the offerings of each one of those individual entities to collaborate and work together. And then the final example is a wonderful project that's being done on a Native American reservation up sort of in the Plain State areas. And it's taking what was a very basic bare bones facility on this reservation that was doing some small scale production and shared kitchen work, and going to allow them to increase their co-packing and production capabilities to serve farmers, to really expand value added offerings that they'll be able to add back into their community and put into traditional market channels. It upgrades some of the equipment, it upgrades some of the different programs and entrepreneurial supports, it creates educational outlets around all of it, and it also creates some great new training resources for all of them to utilize. So each one of these, it's looking at the strength of an initial facility or an initial program and finding partnerships around it in order to make sure there are the team that can help make sure this grant can both be implemented, the goals can be realized, and the grant can be served throughout its process. I'll turn it back to Sheree.
So just this is basically in summary, a short checklist to really think about as you're, again, preparing your proposal and thinking about how you want to position it. The first thing to really understand is what are the other synergies that are happening in your community that can support this? Does this fall in line with a community economic development plan? Are there other food projects that are happening at the same time? It's important to know that because these are potential project partners and stakeholders, and the USDA really wants to see that you are involving the community and that they are supporting this project. So if there are other things happening, it's important to get their support, even if it's, it doesn't have to be directly, but it can be an indirect support. This is kind of also the same with looking at what is the need that this project is needing, and do you have the ability to show the need? They really want to see that you are not working in a vacuum, but you're really thinking about, this is going to help the local economy. This is going to help farmers increase their markets. This is going to help improve access for low-income families. There's also, an emphasis on COVID-related bottlenecks that may have happened that you're really responding to as well. I'm thinking about, I know there's some neat projects out there that are doing that. So as you're thinking about it too, and looking in project partners and stakeholders, who are the people that you need to be bringing on board to help you be able to accomplish what you're setting out to do? And then as you think about your project and outcomes, you need to be setting outcomes and goals that are measurable, that you can be able to report back to the USDA. And again, that's kind of why it's important to really be thinking about what need are you meeting, and are your outcomes directly related to that. And then finally, looking at what is your organization's capacity. I think this is actually a really big one that is sometimes overlooked, is that this is a federal grant. So for some of you, this may be your first step into trying to get some federal dollars. And as you can see for the application process, the grant management process is just as tedious and requires a lot of work. So make sure that you understand who in your organization is going to be managing this grant, and making sure that you are meeting the requirements that you've set out before, and that the USDA is requiring in return. Also think about adding this role into your project budget. And know if this is somebody that you're going to need to hire, or if this person already exists. The other thing to think about when you think about capacity is that this money is not just a lump sum that is given up front. This is a reimbursable. So the USDA is going to only be providing money as you're doing the things that you said you're going to be doing. So you have to have the capital to be able to spend it up front. And it's also not necessarily guaranteed money. So if you receive up to $750,000 after 3 years, and you aren't meeting your benchmarks after year 1, the USDA can absolutely look at it and say, we don't think that we are going to be investing any more money in this. So make sure that you think about the capacity of your ability to carry out the grant, and also understand that there is some flexibility. 3 years is a long time to plan. Sometimes after year 2, it looks very different than you thought. We're very familiar with this process. The important thing is that you communicate that back to the USDA and let them know what changes. And they'll be asking you as well, but there is some flexibility there. So these are kind of a few areas as you're putting it together, that you can answer these questions and feel very secure and confident in how you are putting this together.
Okay, thanks, Sheree. So we're going to wrap up just pointing you to some resources. A really helpful thing, if you haven't already, is to look at who's received these awards in the past. And all of the prior recipients' final reports are posted on the USDA website. The link that's on this page that I think you're going to get after the webinar is actually for the LFPP awards, but they have posted awards for the other 2 programs as well. So that gives you a sense of, what the USDA has made these investments in the past. Our website has some tools. We created, actually, we got a USDA LFPP grant to create some of these tools a few years ago. These are widgets, which simply mean you put some information in and it produces an output that help you understand some of the realities of your vision. One of the tools is a tool that helps you size a commercial kitchen or an incubator kitchen. And if the facility that you have is too big or too small, this tool will give you a sense as to whether you're in the right range. Our blog, we've written a lot. We have a blog post for every one of our tools. And we've written quite a bit about keys to success for different kinds of kitchen projects. So you can tour around our blog, and it's categorized and organized easily so you can find the content you're looking for. And then last, we want to offer that if you send us an email, we'll do our very best to respond to specific questions that you have that either occur to you after today, or we didn't quite answer correctly today. But if you get them to us by the May 31st, we will do our best to get back to you with good answers so that you can have time to incorporate that information in your final grant application. So here's the tool site. We have 6 tools. We are calling them the market sizer and the hub sizer. They have different functions, but essentially they are going to, like in the case of the market sizer, it helps you understand what the demand and supply of local food in your region is. And this is down to the county level. These hub sizers are these input-output models that allow you to enter, how you want to operate your facility, whether it's an aggregation hub or a kitchen, and will give you outputs. Some of them will provide break-even sales and throughput, break-even number of entrepreneurs that you can serve in your kitchen, and the metrics like throughput in terms of pounds of product that are processed, and in some cases tracing back to the numbers of acres that are processed or sold, and then giving you some sense of whether your facility is in the right range in terms of its size and how much it has to be utilized in order for you to break even. So they're pretty fun to tool around on and help refine your concepts for your applications. So that was a great tool that we want to point you to, and it was developed for this very purpose, to help grant applications be that much farther along before they're reviewed by the USDA. So we are at the end of the content that we prepared for you today, but we are going to now look and see if we have some questions from the chat. And while we do that, why don't I just go back to some of these resources that you can take a look at.
The first question that I have is from Christopher about the implementation with construction between large-scale equipment that may require a certain installation construction component. I think you're okay as long as you just call it installation with the equipment with that construction cost. I think that they're really wanting to differ away from like you're rehabbing a space or you're building something from the ground up. But if I would just wrap it in with installation. So I don't know if that answers your question. Let me know or not, but
it does. Thank you.
Yeah. One question is, it was mentioned that if you receive a federal grant, you need to have a 501c3 status. And Kathy, correct me, this is one grant where that is not the case. Most federal grants you do, but this federal grant, there are exceptions to that.
And this is one of the few programs, in fact, which for-profit organizations are permitted to apply, which we think is one of its great virtues, because for-profit companies are doing as much to boost local food systems as nonprofit organizations are, and the USDA recognized that when they introduced these programs.
Yeah. Can I use the grant to pay for county's plan check fees? I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Do you, Kathy? Or can you provide a little bit more context, Sonia?
And Ashley, if you have any insight on some of these, feel free to chime in.
Yes, hi Ashley. Thank you for this. This is very helpful. My LA County, I've been charged $10,400 to have a CUP, conditional use permit, to put a drive-through in. That was my COVID pivot, so that we can have a drive-through. We got rid of all our seating areas. I'm building the facility in a low socioeconomic area. And then they want a traffic flow analysis, which is costing me more. So I feel like I've spent $50,000 in just permit fees trying to get this facility done. So is it
answer for that? Sheree, do you have any experience with that?
No, I'd have to look. I would have to read through the. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, and I also think that you can't use the funds for things that have happened in the past. It has to be planned and outlined in something that's going to happen in the future. So I'm not sure that that would that would work, unfortunately.
You could potentially use that as your cost. I mean, there is a matching component, so you could use that as your cost match.
Actually, yeah.
Oh, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
And the
Yeah,
other thing is that sometimes there's a grace period. So these are grants that are usually awarded beginning in the new fiscal year, which is October 1st. Often they will permit expenses 3 years prior, 3 months prior to be rolled into the reimbursement. So if these are charges that you're going to incur over the summer, it's possible either as match or as reimbursable expenses that they would still apply.
But they need to be specifically outlined in the budget as when you apply. So you can't get the grant and then say, oh, the last 3 months of just whatever I'm going to throw in there and get reimbursed. It has to be actually put into your application.
That's such a good point.
So do I put it down as permit fees? And then I think somebody said you have to pay for it up front and then you get reimbursed on certain things. Would that be one of them then? I could do the matching.
Well, I can't, I don't think any of us want to go on record saying that those specific fees are allowable. If they are, then actually I've just lost the thread of your question, so I'm not sure I can answer it.
yeah. I can also put in there just as a reminder, or some of the specifics that will answer allowable and unallowable costs. So I'll put that in the chat. The other question that kind of goes along this with the building, the leasing is allowed, and that's the same with vehicles. You can pay for rent, but it can't be like a rent to own situation. So if you're just leasing your space, you can include the leasing amount into your budget. It's just not, you can't do like a lease to own. That's the differentiation. Kind of weird, silly, but that's their little rule. But let me also drop in what I was talking about.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And maybe just like a point of clarification, I want to make sure, because Sonia's comment kind of made it unclear there. So with matching, in regards to matching, there's a component of these grants that will require you to either get matching funds or show matching services in a specific amount. So it's not necessarily that you apply and they're matching the amount that you apply for. It's a component of the grant itself. Sheree, did you want to add any clarification there just around what the matching requirements are?
The matching requirements is 25%. There is this year the ability to do only 10%. The caveat with that is if you only do 10%, you're only eligible for some of the grant money. How they're differentiating that, it's kind of hard. It's kind of wishy-washy. So my recommendation is 25%, actually 26. It's kind of a funny thing to actually 26%. There's just kind of that extra little push over. And again, this can be in-kind costs. So this can be your time, maybe other staff time. There's a whole list of what you can kind of count as in-kind costs. But I would say that those fees, if you've already paid any kind of program fees within that 3 months before, and you can show that you've paid that and include it in the budget, then you can count that as your match.
Just in that payment realm too, because it's something we see clients struggle with frequently. You know, the USDA granting system is you apply, they approve you, you go out and start the work and have to have the capital to sort of front load that work to get started, and then you apply for reimbursement of things as you progress and hit project points through the calendar. So there is that need to be able to sort of start into the project, be able to support that initial capital, and the ability to work through the USDA grant system with your project manager to be able to get reimbursed back for the money, time, et cetera, spent in the project.
Yeah, and we did talk about this last week where you have to have really strong financials and tracking numbers and invoice, like keep all your invoices and really be able to kind of provide all of that. And so you need to make sure that your organization has the capacity to make sure to do that accurately.
I just dropped in chat the document for all of LAMP grants, kind of their, that goes more into depth with their funding. Tanya, I'm reading your question about, I'm not quite sure what your question is. It does sound like a planning grant to kind of find out what the need would be. Do you have anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, it looks to me also like planning, and you'll want to show that you've talked to the farmers that you're implementing the programs with, and show that you that they are committed through a partnership for that. And again, as Sheree was talking about, make sure that you're doing kind of an exploration around the community on what other programs or partners are working in that same space, so that you have a good understanding of what work's already happening and how you might tailor your application to working with the work that's already happening in your community around that.
And the other piece to that too would be, if you're wanting to find a space, that could be kind of year 2 of, you want to find what the need is, and then actually physically identifying a space or where it would be. That could be part of the planning process and part of an outcome that you would show.
Mm-hmm. So part of it might be a facility kind of evaluation, where you're looking at evaluating different facilities, and that might actually be one of the outcomes of your project, is to figure out what, how to find the right building. I did also want to mention that if you are new to this process, and this is the first time you're hearing about these USDA grants, and you maybe aren't ready this year, that's fine. That's great. And that's a good thing to probably know about yourself and your organization and what you're trying to achieve. This year, they are looking for additional reviewers for the grants. So if you're a food system leader in your community and you want to help by evaluating these grants this year, you can learn a lot about how these grants are evaluated and implemented, and see all kinds of projects from all over the country on what the applications are looking like. So if you're still trying to learn about this, it's, I believe, $750 or $700 this year for becoming a reviewer, and you'll get a set of applications that you will review and rank. And that's a really great way to get to know these programs better, and be able to have a little bit more understanding of how to apply in the future. So I'll also include that in the email.
Any other questions for today? Very good. Well, I think we could wrap this up then. Reiterate the offer to answer questions as they may come up over the next 10 days or so as you're writing your, thinking about your applications. And I just want to thank you, Ashley, thanks for the opportunity for us to come and talk with your community, but also thank you for all the work you do. You've created an incredible product. You've got an amazing team. I've been to 2 of your summits and have learned so much at each one. I've enjoyed meeting you and enjoy you personally. And then on top of all of that, if that weren't enough, you're devoting your time to support these incredibly valuable programs. And this is all on her, free time, right? All of this you're doing is your free time. And it's just been a real pleasure to get to know you and admire you from afar and up close, and to be sort of in awe of all that you're able to do. So thanks for the opportunity again. Thanks to Andrea and Sheree for joining me with the NVA team, and to all of you for your good questions and all the good work you're doing. And you're not on a call like this because you have small plans. So we admire all of the ambition that's represented in the 16 squares or 25 squares or however many there are on the screen.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Kathy, thanks for the kind words. You just made my day. And yeah, again, if you guys have questions, I know Kathy, I put Kathy's email. I will be following up with an email with all the resources and the slides and all the information. And we'll have the recording from this webinar also posted on our blog. The Food Corridor blog soon. So thank you guys so much for attending the second webinar, and thank you guys so much for your preparation today and such a high content or dense content session today. So thank you, everyone.